Thanks for joining us for City Council Comments. I'm Steve Ericson along with Wade Demmer. Today we're talking about both the February 7th and the February 20th City Council meetings. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
We just are coming off of Snowflake Days here. We had a great celebration again this year.
Yeah, and then we got a foot of snow.
Yeah, just in time. I mean, the medallion hunt would have been a lot more interesting with like the 12 inches of snow we got in the last few days. But I know they had a good time, and the snow we did have, they were able to hide it better this year. So
yeah, it's always a great event, and you know, you thank all the volunteers and everyone who makes it such a good event.
Yeah, it was good. All right. Well, we're going to first off start talking about our items from the Tuesday, February 20th meeting. One of the items there we wanted to talk about was receiving the lawful gambling report and authorizing payment to the Coon Rapids Community Strength Foundation.
Right. So, you know, we do have some gambling that's allowed within the city. The pull tabs, there's a certain number of sites that are allowed to have pull tabs, and it's a partnership between whatever group runs the pull tabs. So, you know, the hockey group, and then the building that has them. So whichever restaurant or bar, and then some of the money comes back through the city Community Strength Foundation, which pays for all sorts of great stuff, including the fireworks on the 4th of July.
Okay, so that payment, a certain percentage, then goes to this Community Strength Foundation.
Right, exactly, and again, that it's just one of the very, very many parts of the city, and so that foundation then is a separate entity. City council's not in control of it, but they partner with us and try to make the city a more fun place to live. So, you know, it helps people justify when they're having a little fun doing pull tabs that some of that money goes to the youth sports and some of it goes to the city itself.
All right. So looks like $57,000 was the total lawful gambling contribution to the city, making the 90% contribution equal to $52,171.
Yep, exactly. So again, you know, it pays for a decent number of fireworks. We'll talk about on the second agenda or the second meeting day that we also got to pay for a stage that should be an exciting asset for the city as well.
Yeah, that looks cool. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about more on that coming up here. We want to talk about now some assessments, street assessments specifically for the upcoming street reconstruction this year, and we spent quite a bit of time. We had quite a large number of people here for that. Yeah,
assessments are a weird thing because you don't really think about them, especially as a first-time homeowner, until suddenly you get this notice that you're going to have to pay what looks like a giant chunk of money, and then you don't know why this giant chunk of money is suddenly being sent to you. And every year people come in, and I got to tell you, before I was on the council, I would have had the exact same question. Why am I being told to pay this amount? I already paid my taxes. Shouldn't my taxes cover the streets? And it's not a bad question. And in a lot of ways, yeah, they probably should. But the way cities tend to pay for streets is because it improves the value of your house. You are allowed to, as a city, have the owner pay a portion of it. There's a few pros and a few cons. One of the pros is that everybody on the street pays for it, including groups that are normally not taxed. So it's a way to recoup some of the price of maintaining a street from a group with a lot of traffic, quite frankly, like a church or a nonprofit. But then the flip side is, of course, you as a homeowner have to pay this very different amount this given year than you normally pay. But the reason it works out that way is that if your street is being fixed this year, you get assessed for it, you pay for a couple of years on your taxes, and then you don't pay for however long it is that your street's still in good shape. Meanwhile, we're fixing streets every year. So last year, someone paid an assessment. 2 years ago, someone paid an assessment. 3 years ago, someone paid an assessment, and you didn't pay for their streets. So every year, someone comes in and says, why don't you end this? And the answer is pretty much, well, if we did, what would we do with the people who paid last year? Would we give them return money to them?
Yeah.
So once you're on the assessment train, it's very hard to get off it, especially without a really long transition period. The big thing Coon Rapids residents should know is we have one of the lowest assessment rates anywhere around. Some cities pay 100% assessment, some are 80, some are 50, we're 50. So half of it is paid for by taxes, and then half of it is paid for by assessments, but the assessment rate is locked for a given home. So every house pays the same dollar amount. Gets a little more confusing if you're in a townhome or a commercial business, because then you pay per foot on the road. But again, there was a street, I think in the last years, where we were repairing a street, and the street was on the border between Coon Rapids and Andover. Okay. And if you lived on the Coon Rapids side, you paid less than if you lived on the Andover side, because they assess at a higher rate than Coon Rapids. Mm-hmm. So yes, when your assessment comes through, you're on the hook for kind of a surprisingly large amount of money compared to your normal taxes, but it is lower than other cities. So that's the best silver lining, that you see. And the big key, I think, is, and just a good thing for people to think about when they're looking at homes or they're looking at where they're at in their home ownership, is if the roads in front of you are in rough shape, there's a chance an assessment is coming in the next couple years. And the city does keep sort of this master list of all the streets and what condition they're in. And as they fall from good to fair to poor, the assessment is coming. And so it's wise to start saving a little bit. You have a choice with assessments to pay it all right away, or to have it roll onto your tax bill with a very low interest rate over a couple of years. In the end, over a long term, you pay slightly less because of assessments than you would if we rolled all of it into taxes, and the slightly less is because the nonprofits and the other tax-exempt groups have to pay assessments. And if they didn't have to pay assessments, all homeowners would pay the tax instead. Right. So it's slightly favorable if you live in Coon Rapids long enough. If you're only in Coon Rapids for 3 years and you happen to get hit with an assessment, not as favorable. Yeah. So stay in the city, and you're fine.
You got that positive message out of that.
I mean, do my best,
Bottom line, you're going to pay it coming or going. I mean, it has to be paid. It's less than $2,000. It looks like per property.
Yep.
And that can be put on your taxes for 10 years, like you said, with a low interest rate.
Yeah.
So people can pay it up front interest-free, or if they can't afford to do that, it can roll onto your property taxes.
And one of the keys is, too, if you do sell, we do study this. We do make sure that the assessment rate is fair. A new, nice street does increase your home value. We sort of had a quote between $2,000 and $5,000, depending on the house, over a street that's in rough shape. And so if you get assessed and you're planning on selling the next year, it should increase the sales value. So it's writing yourself a check, basically.
Okay. So at least if you paid it, you'd be getting your money back.
Right.
All right. So assessments, never a fun topic. Like we said, we had a lot of folks here to talk about it.
Yeah.
These projects are moving forward. The assessment hearing was held. Council ordered the project and approving the plans and specifications these are a bunch of different areas, 29 different sections in this resolution.
Yep.
I know there's more in the other. And these will actually be, the project's advertised in March, April. Bids will be received on April 20th, and then the contract will be awarded, it looks like, after that, and the assessments will be adopted May 1st.
Yeah. And the assessments, some people challenge the assessment. We don't evaluate them at the city council meeting. That's a different path, including all sorts of legal paths. We tell everyone the assessment is coming. We order the project. If a given house challenges the assessment and has found some reason why they don't have to pay it, then it just slightly adjusts the amount of money. Right. In general, assessments have been held up in the past, and it's pretty rare that someone's assessment is fully changed under a challenge. But there are some circumstances where they are, and so when people feel like they have a legitimate reason to challenge their assessment, most of the time the courts will say no, but there are times when the amount will be reduced.
All right, and that's basically what this hearing was, to allow the folks that wanted to do that.
Right. This is the start of the process.
Yeah.
They have to have officially challenged it by today so that they can enter the challenge or by that meeting so that they can enter the challenge process. Yep.
All right. Moving along, council awarded design service agreement. This is for Lions Coon Creek Park improvement. This is actually a project that's going to happen in 2019. We're already getting ready for that.
Yeah, so Lions Park, as everybody knows, is one of the real draws in Coon Rapids. We have our neighborhood parks and our sort of magnet regional parks, and Lions Park is one of the best attended. So delicate dance for the city to pull off here, because everyone loves it, but if you're really objective about it, a lot of that equipment's in pretty rough shape now. Mm-hmm. Every year I go there and one more piece is blocked off because something's wrong with it. And as that stuff gets older, it's harder just to replace it. You can't find the parts. So the idea is to move it up, move it along, and while trying to maintain the character and the spirit of it being a really fun park. A couple examples, they do try to update it to match the times. One of the biggest changes is to get a parking lot on the same side as the park, because especially the accessibility issue, that existing parking lot, it's a haul to get from that parking lot to the park over some rough terrain if you have accessibility challenges. So that will help with the accessibility, which is really a positive thing. But then second, there's things at that park that really aren't used very much, and they're trying to update them to modern things that people use. One example, if you've never heard of Gaga Ball. Gaga Ball is a big deal with younger kids right now. I can't explain fully what it is other than it's a ball game that kids like, and they're going to put a Gaga Ball field, arena, box, whatever it is, because it's something it's more used today, and it'll, from my knowledge, be the only one in the city. So just examples where they're trying to update it, keep it relevant, keep it current, and if that's a trend that falls away, then they'll find something else to put there over time. So, just like we're going to talk about pickleball at one of the other parks, which is especially used by some of the, especially there's a large retiree community that plays pickleball. This is something a lot of kids use, and Lions Park is really for kids in that age range.
Interesting. I'd never heard of it
myself.
So this is apparently what they do when they're not on Snapchat? This is
a little younger. This is the, this is sort of the elementary school kid age. And the other nice thing they're really trying to do with the new Lions Park layout is really try and tie in the creek. So there'll be some creek overlooks, and there'll be a little more walking. So I think it'll be a nice addition to make those changes. Of course, anytime you change a popular park, there's going to be some disagreement over whether it's for the better or not. But the other thing is kids turn over pretty quick. The kids playing on it this year, 5 years from now won't be. It'll be a whole new group of kids.
Right. All right. So this sort of begins the design process. I know we've had some concept plans and all that. This is sort of the final design. They'll move into this phase, and then it sounds like early next year they will go out for bids, and then construction would start in the spring of 2019.
Yeah.
And this is the last park that's being done as part of the park bond referendum.
And so the park bond referendum, again, that the citizens of Coon Rapids passed, saying we are willing to spend more to make our parks better and do the park and trail upkeep. This is really the last one, and basically saying so many people use this park. Sand Creek was one of the big ones. The Boulevard Park's another really big one, and this is the other really big one that we want to make sure we get right for the people's money.
Yeah. All right. Again, that one in 2019. There's two more we'll talk about that are being done this year, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Before that, we have vacation of public roadway easement. We have two of those, one on 100th Avenue and one on an unnamed street. Didn't know you could vacate something that isn't there, or
isn't named. This is a great.
And this relates to Port Riverwalk.
Yeah, and we can tie that into the meeting on the 7th because there were a few things about Port Riverwalk there too. So we've been and actually a meeting in between too, a work session. So we've been working very hard on Port Riverwalk, which is that area across from the clay hole. If you've been around for a while, to try to get something into that area. And that the city bought a lot of parcels of land before the recession that were pretty underperforming, underutilized pieces of land to try to build something better at that entry to the city. And then, of course, the recession hit and no one wanted to build anything. Right. But Centra Homes, which is a Coon Rapids company located really close to where we're sitting right now, has expressed a lot of interest. And so they're looking at building up to 157 owner-occupied detached townhomes. And we're still working to see if there's any commercial that can go in there, but it's primarily focused on these detached townhomes. Really, a housing stock that Coon Rapids doesn't have a lot of. Very attractive first homes and even second or third or final homes. So really, really nice buildings that you see, and something that a lot of other cities have quite a lot of. But in order to get there, we have to take all those properties that we bought, and we have to figure out how to make it one big thing that we can sell to them. And to do that, there's all these very procedural things. So there's a street there that has to go away. It has some easements on it. We had to get rid of that easement. there's a place where there was a street that was supposed to go that never got built. So there's an easement for a street that was never actually made. When you go through all the paperwork on this, you find stuff like that. And so
Is this the unnamed street?
That's the unnamed street. So if you ever, want to think about how exciting government is, you're vacating the easement for a street that was never built.
Yeah.
So
we found one of those.
Super exciting stuff.
So that and some other tracks that they were.
Yeah, and then on the 7th, we had some subdivisions, some so you take all those different parcels and you redivide it up because obviously what was there before is very different than what's going to be there with the townhomes.
All right.
So really just prepping the whole area for what we see coming, which hopefully this summer we'll kind of get that officially moving and maybe even break ground still this year.
Yeah, I know that's kind of the goal here, and then it still needs to go through the approval process.
Yes.
As far as the plans, we haven't totally seen all those as far as Planning Commission. City Council will need to sign off on that. But yeah, they're saying late summer, early fall would be a possibility.
Absolutely.
So kind of exciting after seeing that land sort of sit here vacant for a decade now.
And I was told when we first, so when I was knocking on doors almost 4 years ago, one of the things people said is, we got to redevelop Coon Rapids Boulevard. We got to redevelop Coon Rapids Boulevard. And someone who used to be on the council said to me, development is fast, development is easy, redevelopment takes a really long time because you have to wait things out. You have to let something get to the point where someone's willing to fix it. You have to, and here's a plot where we bought all the parcels, knocked it all down, and then hit a recession.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how hard it is to get an entire boulevard, but we've got just such great stuff up by Mercy and how nice that area looks, and now we're doing the same thing down here at Port Riverwalk, and so redevelopment is going on, and you add more houses, you add more traffic. The way you get better stuff on a road isn't by saying we want to put a restaurant here. The way you get better stuff on a road is by getting people on that road so that the restaurant people want to build a restaurant there.
Yeah. I know it sounds easy, but it's not.
Right.
People are usually just like, why don't you just put this here or put that there? But it's
it
not
turns
that
out
easy.
I can't just tell someone to put a restaurant there, right?
Yeah.
These guys have informatics and they're looking at traffic counts during peak hours of the day, and no amount of us saying we think a restaurant should go here is going to change the numbers they're looking at. But putting 157 houses there will change those numbers.
Yeah. All right. And then we had one other action sort of related to Port Riverwalk. This was modifying the tax increment financing plan for this TIF district.
Right. And so the TIF district was put there, and it starts a time limit. Yeah. And obviously, if you don't break any ground, there's no real use to that time limit. So this actually required some state work, and we were able to get that extended thanks to the state saying, yeah, that makes sense. So again, pretty procedural, but you're working with multiple governments to make this happen, so nothing's a sure thing.
Yeah, that's for certain. All right, well, there's our update on Port Riverwalk.
Yeah.
Glad to have that. Moving along, Council adopted an ordinance. This allows veterinary clinics as a permitted use in the regional shopping district. We're talking up in the Riverdale area.
This is one where, it sounds like a lot's happening. In reality, to me, it was more of a consistency thing. There were some uses for that area that said you couldn't board animals overnight, but then at the same time, if there was a pet store, they could board animals overnight, and so it struck us as a little odd when someone basically asked, can we put a clinic in there, and then they looked at the wording, and so we really tried to clean it up so that it could be a use as long as it wasn't more distracting than, say, having a pet shop there.
Okay. And I know at the time when they talked about this initially, there was some concern about the traffic. Would people be flying into a regional shopping district? But they said there wasn't a lot of that going on at a regular veterinary place.
Right.
So.
And a good example was, the former police chief, Councilmember Wells, did point out that he doesn't ever remember having written a ticket for someone driving too fast next to one of the existing veterinary clinics or going to an accident for one of the existing veterinary clinics. So, it does seem like that's a use that isn't going to cause a lot of panic.
Yeah. Okay. So that was approved and will be allowed, and it sounded like there was a group that was interested in going in there.
Yeah, those are the sort of things where I think the best way to talk about it is we made it more consistent with how a pet shop could use it, and why would you restrict a clinic differently than you'd restrict a pet shop. So to me, it made sense. Once we talked about it for a little while, and
Yeah. So now the use is allowed. Now people
Right.
could apply if they're interested.
All these restrictions that are in ordinances, I think, are good to occasionally revisit and make sure that they actually make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. All right. Council adopted a resolution accepting plans and specifications for the 2018 park improvements and authorizes solicitation of bids. We have 2 park projects that are being done this year as part of the park bond.
Right, so we have Crooked Lake and Riverwind, and again, sort of updating these parks. Riverwind is an exciting one for a lot of people in the community. As I mentioned, there's a large group of pickleball enthusiasts, and if you've never seen pickleball, it's a little bit like tennis, but different. You use a smaller court space, use a hard racket, and it's great exercise and very popular, especially with a certain group of retirees. And so they're pretty excited to have this as a pickleball court area. There is a park they're currently using, but this is going to have that. So another amenity. I really like each park having something unique about it. And so now here's Riverwind with its unique thing. That's not the only thing that's going to be there, right? We're updating the entire park structure, and same with Crooked Lake, updating the entire park structure. But one of the other things about Riverwind that's interesting, the original plan had been to tear down the building there that's currently the teen center, but the citizens of the area, the people in the neighborhood, had said, this is a big deal to us. We grew up with that building. That building means something to us. It was the swimming pool, it was the original Orrin Thompson, the area. So we've done what we can to not make tearing that down part of the plan, and we're still trying to figure out how much of the building to save and how we're going to be able to afford that. But one advantage of keeping some amount of that building is it gives you more meeting space, and having meeting space in various areas in the city instead of funneling everyone to 1 or 2 buildings is nice because neighborhoods can use it. A Girl Scout troop, for example, uses it right now. And then the second is there's plumbing there, so you have the opportunity to actually have a running water bathroom instead of just porta potties, and that I think pairs well with the pickleball. If they're going to have tournaments, it's nice to have a place where you can wash your hands and get a drink out of the faucet. So, a thing that we're still investigating and trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do. So stay tuned on that. Yeah,
it sounds like funding is sort of the holdup at this point because it wasn't necessarily considered as part of the redevelopment plan.
Yeah, in the original, when we were laying out how we're going to use the referendum money, that wasn't part of it.
The building was going to be gone.
Right, and so, but again, it's almost always cheaper to update something that's already standing than to tear something down and then put up a new building somewhere else. And so then it's, do we need the space? We would use the space. Will people find that space useful? If they would, if it would be in demand anyway, then keep the building you already have. It's just, it's more economically sustainable to rehab an old building most of the time. And if you let the building get to the point where it's not, then you probably should knock it down.
Yeah, then you probably have more problems than you need.
Yeah.
All right, so we should know in the next couple of months what's happening there. I imagine construction is supposed to start on these as soon as possible this spring.
Right.
And the completion will be this fall.
Right, so look forward to those parks being updated.
All right. Council amended the 2018 budget. This is for a police training facility. This isn't really anything new. It's some modifications being made where they do this training.
Right, so again, not a big change, but they use some of the forfeiture funds to try to improve the policing in the city, and this is one where specifically during training they want to have the training be more viewable for the instructor, and so they're building some changes into the facility to make it easier for the instructors to assess how well the trainees are doing. So again, good use of forfeiture funds to improve police training.
All right, it's about $20,000 is what we're looking at here.
Right. So, it's not great when your stuff gets forfeited, but at least it goes to better policing. So
yeah, definitely help them with training out there, it looks like. And then council also adopted a resolution authorizing the purchase of a portable stage. You alluded to this a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so again, another use of that gambling money from the Community Strength Foundation. In this case, the city is paying for the stage, but Community Strength has agreed to pay for half of it so that it can be used at more events. We have a portable stage, but it's a really manual, labor-intensive process, and there's some worry that it could lead to people getting hurt. It's an older stage, and so especially Chief Piper was looking into this. It's a really cool setup. It's very automated. Hate to say push button, but it basically converts from a truck into a stage. And so then you have all the things you want for a portable stage, so we can have a band perform at an event. Again, right now we have one, but no one's going to drag it to an event, whereas this will give us the ability, and this is why the Community Strength Foundation is interested in it, give us the ability to do more entertaining things at more locations more frequently. So I think it'll be a good asset for the city to have. You can imagine that it opens up the number of places you can have a concert or whatever else you might want to use a stage for. And if you've seen those portable stages in action, it's really a great thing to have. I mean,
it has built-in lights. It has
the
stairs,
hours to set up a manual one versus the minutes to set up this. Really, I think the city will get a lot more use out of this new one than the old one.
All right, so this is just over $100,000. It's being split half the cost with the city and half with the Community Strength Foundation.
Right, and again, it's something that I think a lot of residents will see in when they go to events. I think it also opens up our ability to have different kinds of events, more events. You can't have a big concert at a place where there's no stage.
Right.
And so then all the concerts end up being at one or two venues, and this gives you the possibility to have them in more places in the city. And so hopefully it brings, if you think back to the community survey that we did, one of the things we scored a little bit lower on was there's a lot of entertainment options for the city. Now we can go through our entertainment calendar and say, well, there are a lot of entertainment options. Yeah. The way I think about that is there are a lot of entertainment options, but they might not be near me or easily accessible. Is how, someone in one part of the city might not want to go to a completely different part of the city for a concert, where this may give us the ability to move things around and have them closer and more accessible for more people.
It's funny you say that, because I like to travel around, go different places, but there are people that don't want to leave their immediate area and need something there as well. So
well, and also, maybe for someone like you who wants to travel around more places, we can have these at more places, and you can go to more of the parks. And I know my kids love it when we go to say a meeting in the park, at a park they've never been to. They get to go explore that park and have fun. So we've got this great park system, and doing more events at more different parks is a possible outcome of getting the new stage. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. Well, that's all the items we have from our 2 council meetings. We're just about out of time, unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, again, a lot of this stuff is really procedural, a little, but again, it's the stuff you have to do as a city, and even if it seems procedural when you look at it one at a time, it's a great example with this Riverwalk where we have to do 10 or 11 little things, but it adds up to what we hope is a really nice new thing for the city.
Yeah, great. Well, it's great having you here today and talking to us at the meetings. Thank you at home for watching, and we'll see you back here after our 2 meetings with March with probably some more procedural stuff.